Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Eddie, with another brand new episode of Eddie G's Comic Culture. Once again, always brought to you guys by the good folks over at Black Apparel. I'm sending a special shout out once again to those cats, thanking them for all the work and contributions that they've done to the show. They've got an excellent website for you guys to check out, so if you ever have the time, make sure you give them a look see at www.blackapparelblk.com. Um, Also, wanted to send two special shout outs to friends of mine on Instagram. Of course, you may know them by now. The first and foremost is a Strictly Comedy Vault. He's a good young man. He's got some good content on his page. He's an up and coming writer. If you have an Instagram account, make sure you check his stuff out. The guy's got some pretty good, pretty good photos regarding a lot of the Funko Pop figures that's out there right now, and also the Blu-ray Dan, who also has an Instagram account with wonderful content, which also leads to his YouTube channel as well. He's got some great videos giving insightful reviews regarding old movies and new as well on Blu-ray. Also a great inspiration to what I'm doing right about now. Um, so today I wanted to do another special tribute episode. Last night I did rewatch one of my fan favorite. I guess you could say it's a fan favorite film. One of my favorite films personally. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. Now, if you guys remember, I had a tribute episode dedicated to A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 that I recorded not too long ago. It's up on my channel right about now, so if you guys haven't seen it, make sure you check it out. So going right off the top, at this point, at this point, I wanted to discuss exactly how the movie is. Automatically, I think it's the best sequel ever out of all the Nightmare on Elm Street films, quite possibly the best sequel in all of horror movies. If I'm being honest at this point, it's an excellent movie. It starts off honestly with a character by the name of Kristen, who is actually played by a very young Patricia Arquette. She starts experiencing the same dreams and nightmares of Freddy Krueger. Starts off with her going into the bathroom. You see her posting up like a collage of newspaper photos and so on and so forth at the beginning of the movie, and then she's trying to keep herself up with loud rock, with loud music, and as well as using drinking Coca-Cola and with a spoonful of Folgers crystals. I don't know how that woman still had teeth after that movie, but this is exactly this is the starting point of it all. And as she has a nightmare, of course, during that scene, as she's doing that and she plays the loud rock music, she's confronted by her mother regarding the noise in her room. So, nonetheless, she still ends up falling asleep even with all of that. And the first nightmare that she goes through is she walks into the bathroom, and as she's about to splash water on her face, supposedly to keep herself awake. At this point, she's already asleep and in a dream state. The faucet in the bathroom actually grabs her hand, and the other faucet actually has the claws of coming out the end of coming out the tip of the nozzles, and it attempts to kill her as it scratches her successfully as well. So obviously, Freddy's still around, and he's possessed he's actually possessed the plumbing in her bathroom, which is a little crazy, but it's a very what a very unique way to start off a movie actually. And of course it leads to her being placed in a mental institution where she's encountered with other young children, teenagers actually, who have had encounters with Freddy Krueger in their dreams as well. um, it's an awesome movie, honestly speaking. It takes place. It's way, as I said before, it's leaps and bounds better than a sequel than A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, honestly. And it actually kicks it up a notch with as far as the creativity is concerned with Freddy Krueger and his obviously murdering these students. Because as I said, they're all teenagers, they're all troubled children, and obviously because they're in a mental institution. And one of the first step that actually happens in the movie, and it happens to a pretty good character who I actually wanted to see I actually wanted to see him go further into the movie. I don't understand exactly why they took him out quickly the way they did, but he's the first person to die, and he just so happens to be a sleepwalker, and it was it's one and one of the most it's pretty great. It's disgusting. Honestly speaking, it's disgusting how It happens, but it's very creative. Freddy, in his dream state, man, in the child's dream state, he actually manages, because this kid, he specializes in making homemade dolls and puppets and so on and so forth. Um, he actually manages to tear out this kid's veins in his dream, and actually, in a sense, like, damn, I forgot, what would you, how do you call those things? He has he has like a puppet by the strings. He's manipulating this child to walk around the hospital, and up to a point where he actually drags him up. He makes him walk up, to the top floor of the hospital, of course, and then the kid is, in his dream state. He's like, he's suffering, honestly, but his roommate, who apparently was just kind of an asshole, I guess, because it is what it is. I don't know what was the reason why they made him that way, but the roommate that he was with, who's also one of the kids who actually has recurring nightmares with Freddy Krueger, but he turns out to be a major asshole. And as he sees his bunkmate walking out of the room, he just figures that the guy's a sleepwalker or whatever, but he's literally walking, strangely enough, like he's being dragged with his hands. So by that reasoning alone, I would think that that's enough to question, but I guess that just, they'll gloss over that. So Freddy goes ahead and he manipulates the young boy to walk all the way to the top floor of the mental institution, and as he brings him he brings him up to an edge of a window. Freddy goes ahead and uses his claws and cuts the strings, automatically rendering the child dead. But the way that it's, nobody's seeing the actual visuals of what's going on in his dream state, obviously. So they don't even know that he's like he's being dragged he's being dragged by Freddy through him using his own, as gruesomely enough, his own veins as drawstring. I guess you could say as puppet strings, and he cuts him loose, and the guy ends up falling off. Falling out of the window, dying automatically, but it makes it look like a suicide. So oddly enough, the kids end up going through this group psychosis deal, and crazily enough, and the movie still takes place in Springwood, and they bring in Nancy Thompson, who's played by Heather Langenkamp again, and she's there to try to help these people, try to help these young kids going ahead, combat Freddy into their nightmares. And unfortunately, she lets them know that each one of those kids that are involved in the therapy sessions, that they're the last surviving members of the families who actually killed Freddy Krueger. So it dives deeply into what Freddy's about and what he is, why he's doing what he does, and it's oddly enough, this movie has like a lot of stars. And it's like I said, it's Patricia Arquette, and then of course you have Lawrence Fishburne, but like I said, this was the '80s, mid to late '80s, so he was still going by Larry Fishburne rather than just Lawrence, strangely enough. So it's pretty cool, because you see the beginning of the stars, and I gotta say, well, I just gotta interject with this. This series has to be like a kick in the professional nuts for both. Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund. Not so much Robert Englund, because he always embraced playing the character so much. He was never one of those guys that get pissed off about being typecast as just a single character like some actors do, and it's been proven time and time again. Very few actors actually do embrace these iconic roles that they have. They don't really because quite a few, I guess, when you get into the profession of acting, you really don't want to become involved in as just known as the one guy who plays. Oh, you just played you played this character and such. But I can understand some of the reason of that, because there's other works that they have as well. But most importantly, they're well known just for that role. Michael Keaton always loved playing Batman. He still considers himself Batman to this day. The man's 66 years old, honestly, and he still considers himself to be Batman. And that's awesome. That's awesome. Mark Hamill as well. He's another one of those characters who, although he hasn't really been necessarily typecast due to the stuff that he's done. I mean, he's always going to be recognized as Luke Skywalker, but apart from that, he was also the voice of the Joker in the Batman animated series for a long, long time, and so much so that it actually happened that he was just he was voicing the character well into the late 21st century, even into the video games. It's the recent video games that's been out to the Arkham series, so to speak. So he's really like he's really one of those few actors that embraced it. Unlike guys like and Robert Englund is one. I have to agree that he's one of the few as well. Christopher Reeve wasn't too as much as I love Superman. I love the old Superman films. I grew up with the Superman films as well. Christopher Reeve unfortunately didn't really feel too much on doing Superman too much. Even after, from what I was told, remembering, and I did some research, and it is true. Christopher Reeve, excuse me. Christopher Reeve was actually looking to be finished with the Superman role, even right after directly Superman 2. And for the next two films, he had to be coaxed into playing the role again, which is understandable, I guess you could say, considering the critical reception of Superman 3 and 4. He didn't even want to do part 4 then. The only reason why he did Superman, The Quest for Peace, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, was because Warner Brothers was going to give him, the opportunity, and he did seize it as well for writing the story for the film, the treatment for the film. And unfortunately, because of budget cuts in the studios, he didn't get the opportunity. The film was poorly received as well as poorly made at that, honestly. So it was really hard at that point. I figured at that point, especially, that after Superman 4, that Christopher Reeve was just officially done with the role. But that's neither here nor there. So, but as I was saying before, this series has to be like a cake and a professional nuts regarding Heather Langenkamp in particularly so, because it was always the supporting actors and actresses that actually blew up out of this, because it wasn't just Patricia Arquette and then of course Lawrence Fishburne. You also have Johnny Depp, who was in the first film as well, so who played her boyfriend, which was pretty cool, even though he did die in the movie. Spoiler alert. But we all know him. Johnny Depp is now an actor that's worldwide and known all over the world, honestly. So it's I guess it's kind of hard to see this kind of stuff. But I digress. Back to the movie. So she's brought in to assist these children in their growth. And another thing I wanted to discuss about also was what was the deal with that gray streak of hair that she had, that like rogue the X-Men rogue look that she had in that movie, like out of nowhere. Like, what happened? Did that just become like like it wasn't even ever explained? Because even when she returned for the film The New Nightmare, she didn't have that wasn't even present in her that wasn't present at her at all. So it made no sense. I was like, what the hell is this about? But either way, so she's brought into the scene in the institution to help these teens that combat Freddy and his in the nightmare state, and she becomes friendly with the head doctor, who tries to reach out to these kids, who, even though he has his own, he means well, but unfortunately he has his own doubts regarding the Freddy Krueger whole ordeal. But she makes a proposal for him to go ahead and introduce a certain drug that can like nullify their dreams, which is called Hypnocil, and obviously he's against it usually, right off the bat. But then after one of the other children die, and I gotta give this movie all the credits that's due, because I said that they were very creative with this film. The deaths in this movie were absolutely outrageous. When one of them who happens to be a girl, I forgot her name. She's watching TV and she's got aspirations to be an actress. And she's watching the TV late, and you actually see the cameo for Zsa Zsa Gabor there. And she's trying to fight her sleep to stay awake, so that she doesn't deal with the nightmare of having to deal with Freddy. But of course she falls. It doesn't go as well as planned at all. So it has her going up to the it ends up having she freaks out because, as I said, the cameo with Zsa Zsa Gabor is on the television. It's some sort of a late night talk show, and the talk show host ends up becoming Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger just kills her right on the spot, and then he turns to the TV screen and talks to the girl, the young girl that's in the couch in the rec room of the institution, and straight up just disses her right then and there. So as she walks towards the TV, the TV automatically sprouts these arms, and then Freddy's head just comes right out the top of the television set, antennas and all, and tells her, he tells her that she's got a big break coming, and then grabs her and then slams her face right through the through the glass of the television. So it was pretty awesome. At that point, Fishburne, who plays one of the doctors, finds her and he starts freaking the hell out, which I would myself. So obviously, after that point, the doctor actually does go ahead and prescribes the Hypnocil, but it doesn't go as well as planned. It doesn't really work too well. Kids end up still having it, and one of them who happens to be a mute, one of the kids who ends up having to be a mute, he ends up getting sucked into a nightmare, obviously, but he falls into a coma. And in one of the most creative scenes, actually, you could say, he ends up losing. What was that? He ends up getting one of the nurses that he's sleeping. That he's dreaming that one of the nurses is there, and she gets naked, of course, and gives him the idea that she wants to get with him, and it looks like they're about to get it on until she starts making out with him, and then she has like one of the most it was, like I said, it's creative but also gross. It's not really it leaves you it's pretty queasy actually. But she ties the kid up to the bed with her own tongue, actually, and it's nuts. It's like I said, this is a very creative film. It's not for the faint of heart, actually, because quite a bit of stuff that's it's pretty gruesome. It extends the gore factor quite a bit on this one, and as the kid is about to fall into a deep state, he's still not he's not dead. Freddy's just holding him captive, and so at that point the child is just the guy's just in a coma so far. So they're all trying to figure out how to get him out. One of the girls who happens to be one of the bad, I guess you could say she was the roughneck, I guess you could say. She was a former addict, and so also that was another way that she died. One of the ways that she died also was she goes. I gotta give her props because she went ahead and she wanted to go ahead and she was gonna go face to face with Freddy. She was actually gonna go toe to toe with the guy, but again. Freddy plays to the weaknesses very well. He knows these kids. You know what I'm saying? I guess that's just the way it is when it comes down to know. I guess that's just the way he figures out their weaknesses through their dreams, which is pretty creative. Like I said, very creative. So in the least, she ends up having Freddy does something, and I can't remember the clips because they're pretty and it sucks because it was so late last night that I was watching the movie, but it was awesome. He ends up having the track marks that she was using, that she had on her arms, where she was shooting up heroin, unfortunately, turn into eyes. And that's when Freddy took the time out to make the kill, and he just stabbed her right there and just gutted her from there on out. So it was over, so to speak. But one of the key scenes in the movie is when earlier on, when Patricia Arquette's character, Kristen by the name, she's having a nightmare, and she's being chased throughout this house. It's like a mansion, somewhat. So it's something of that matter. And Nancy ends up falling into the dream with her, and at that point, when Freddy becomes this like snake, and he's eating Kristen alive. Nancy appears out of nowhere as she falls into the dream and stabs him in the eye with a shard of glass. And then when Freddy gets up and looks at her, and he does like the Hulk Hogan thing, so it was pretty badass. I like that. That was a good entrance for him to, that was a good way for the both of them to meet throughout that scene. It was pretty awesome the way they did it out, but yeah, that was dope. I gotta give it up to them. So obviously, by that point, there's a child in a wheelchair who's like a fan of who's like a huge fan. Kid looks like McFogel from Superbad. I can't remember that actor's name again, but this guy, this kid who was like a huge Dungeon and Dragons fan, who's a paraplegic. Um, and this goes to show that Freddy has no heart whatsoever in these movies. Like, he takes out whoever. He doesn't give a damn. So the kid in his nightmare, he pretends to be the sorcerer supreme, I guess. Doctor Strange, but as he confronts Freddy in an alleyway in his dreams, obviously he's no match for him, and he ends up getting killed easily. So that one was pretty harsh to say the least. I was like, no, McFogel, or nah, McLovin actually. But it was such a great movie, honestly. And then finally we get some in-depth look into Freddy's character as one of as the head psychiatrist, who I feel like him and Nancy were actually going to be an item in the movie, and they kind of were to a degree. He ends up seeing visions of this nun, who just so happens to be Freddy's mother, and Freddy's mother, who she gives an insight to him as to how she was locked in a room with 100 mental, with about 100 mental patients, and she was, continuously raped by them. So which, in turn, she gave birth to Freddy Krueger, and you know how the story goes from there. Uh, but it definitely was great to see the insight as to the character of Freddy Krueger and why he was doing it. It wasn't really explained in the previous two films, anyways. So it actually laid out some good stuff, some good groundwork for it. Um, but the kid Kincaid, it was the black kid. I forgot. He was he was a street kid. You know what I'm saying? He was a street cat, and he was constantly going. He wanted to go at it with Freddy himself because he was tired of being cornered into a situation where everyone is afraid, because naturally speaking, everyone is and should be afraid, because the guy's like, you have an entity that's out there killing you in your dreams. So with that being said, he actually survives, and he's there in the final fight with Nancy Thompson and Kristen, of course, and then they finally find the kid who's been in the coma throughout the whole time. His name is Joey, actually, and just came to me right now, and they rescue him, and finally Freddy. It's at that point where we realize that Freddy makes a statement. Oh, it's the souls of the children that keep him alive. They give him strength. They give him the power that he has, and at that point, Neil and Nancy's father, John Saxon, which was a pretty cool intro from, glad to see that he was back in there too. John Saxon, I always remember him from Enter the Dragon. He was always Jim Kelly's homeboy, but who freaked out when Kelly got killed, and he actually teamed up with Bruce Lee to take down Han and his whole island. It was pretty badass. So I was actually kind of hoping to see if we would see some kung fu on his end, but that wasn't gonna happen. Wishful thinking, I guess. But it was great to see him, and finally they realized, after Neil, who's the head psychiatrist of the mental institution, by the way, his name is Neil, and also just caught to me right now as well. As he has another vision of Freddy's mother again, and his mother tells him that it's the Freddy Krueger skeleton that has a source of all of his power, so he has to bury it. So they go into an auto yard, a salvage yard, and they go ahead and they proceed to bury it, but the skeleton comes alive, and it goes after him and John Saxon. He ends up killing John Saxon, which, complete bummer at that point. And Saxon's spirit ends up supposedly transcending into the world, into the underworld again, but it's just Freddy using his tricks, his Jedi mind trick on Nancy, so to speak. So Nancy almost dies in this one, but she actually survives, and which is pretty dope, to say the least. And or did she die? Damn, I don't even remember. I think she died. Did she? Well, I'm not too sure, but to say the least. So wrong with that being said, no, actually Nancy does die in the movie. That's right. He stabs and kills her as he psychs her out with the vision of her father. But apparently Kristen goes ahead and she goes ahead and defeats him. And Neil's actually it wasn't even Kristen who actually defeated him. It was Neil because Neil went ahead and buried the bones, and he buries Freddy Krueger's bones, and it ends up destroying Freddy Krueger throughout the film. If I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to think this through, guys. So it's been trust me, it's been a long day. But so he does actually bury the bones of Freddy Krueger into the salvage in the auto yard, and it ends up destroying Freddy. And at that point on, and it's if I'm not mistaken, Neil actually sees Freddy's mother going into her grave as they're in at the end of the movie as it closes out with Nancy's funeral. So at that point, the film closes, and it's of course it leaves open again, as every one of those horror films in the '80s did, opens for the possibility for another sequel, and it did. It left for the Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master, if I'm not mistaken. I think, yeah, that was The Dream Master. And that was actually directed by the Rennie Harlin, who was a director, if I'm not mistaken, for Die Hard or Die Hard 2. One of the Die Hard movies that he did, what he was the director for. So it was pretty crazy. And, but it wasn't as good as the third, it wasn't as good as Part 3, honestly. But, yeah. Anyways, closing it out, it left it as it left it as a very satisfactory sequel. Honestly, the best sequel out of the entire series, and it just didn't make any sense how they just. But I just wish they explained somewhat. I don't think they did explain it in New Nightmare either. Why Nancy Thompson's character had that gray streak of hair, which was bugging me throughout the whole movie. I was like, "What the hell is that?" I'm like, did she just have like a, I don't know, did she go through electroshock therapy or some shit? Why is there like a streak of white hair going across her? Made no sense. But other than that, it serves as a very honorable and very, very good sequel to the film. And especially as compared to the second one also, Freddy's Revenge was absolutely, Freddy's Revenge is to me it was more of a comedy aspect, and it was, and it developed more even though the comedic aspect of Freddy's sense of humor actually developed a lot more as the movies went along, it really was just, part three is just leaps and bounds ahead of the first of part two, and it is, it's an honorable follow up to the first film. It should have been the sequel to the first one, not the second film, and especially so since they didn't even bother mentioning anything about any characters from the second film in the first place in this third one. So that's kind of a little, so it really was just like, unnecessary in a sense, so to speak. But all in all, it was an awesome movie, and definitely something that you guys need to check out if you ever have the chance to do so. Get the Blu-ray, rent it. I don't know if you have Amazon. I'm sure it's on. You could always get it on Amazon Prime, and get a good deal on it. But wow, what an awesome movie that was. So with that being said, I'm just gonna end up having to close this one out, guys. I wanted to make sure that I gave you this tribute episode for you. As I had said before earlier, this is pretty much still the brace myself period, because unfortunately we are dealing with the oncoming Hurricane Irma. So I'm gonna try to get as much done as possible before it's time to bunker down, because unfortunately, as I said before, I'm not too sure if we'll be having a power outage, and if we do have one, I don't know what the extended period is gonna be for that. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for writing out with me. Thank you for all the love and the support that you've given for the show. Everyone who's involved, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, anything that you want to talk about in future episodes, anything that you want me to talk about in future episodes, hit me up right there in the comment section of the videos. I always go through it to check it out, to see what's going on. And we'll definitely have the conversation next time. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Take care, you guys. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.